What's up? No, I can't start it the same way we did last time.
Yeah.
Howdy, y'all.
I hate you. Howdy, y'all. Welcome on into Dolly World. No, what is it? Dollywood? Dollywood.
I would love to go to Dollywood.
Hey, Rue, this is Dolly Parton. I've actually never thought I could do a Dolly Parton impression, and I can't.
I thought it was not that bad, honestly.
Honestly, kind of here for it.
It's pretty good. Okay, speaking of which, Dolly Parton, if you are listening, which I know you are, she's a super friend of the podcast. Okay.
I thought you were going to say, speaking of which, Dolly had a stroke. I thought you were going in that direction or something like that. And that's why I was like, oh, okay.
So is it weird? Okay, wait, before we get into this, I want to talk about Dolly Parton for a second.
Okay.
Dolly Parton is one of those celebrities that I would love to personally meet, but I actually don't follow a lot of her career. But like, I'm awestruck by her. Like,
same. I'm actually in the same boat, and I do like the songs that are like really popular of hers.
Yeah.
But I'm not somebody who actually really enjoys country music. She's somebody that I really should just find. You know what we should do?
What?
You know what we're going to do? I'm forcing this upon it.
Okay.
You and I are doing a road trip in a month.
Yeah.
What if we found one of her albums and we listened to it in the car?
I'm so down. I actually
educate ourselves.
Music. I actually do love Dolly Parton's music, and like I'm more so thinking of like stuff she's done outside of music. Like a lot of her movies, or I haven't seen like
you should see Steel Mongolias.
There's a really good they just did it on Netflix where they turned some of her songs into like episodes of like. So they basically what she did is they took like some of her most iconic songs and they turned them into movies, like short form movies. I've heard it's pretty good.
I want to see this.
Yeah. So
we can't be friends with Trixie Mattel and like not know too much about Dolly Parton. I feel like that's really the pressure I feel right now. It's not like trying to like better educate myself on a queer icon, but more so like, oh, I'm kind of like I play video games with Trixie and I just kind of feel like I'm just letting her down like when I sandbag her in Dead by Daylight or something.
At some point, I feel like Dolly and Trixie share wigs. So it's like we have to. We have to.
Also, I'm going to put this out there. A few years ago at the Glastonbury Festival, she played a stone-studded saxophone and did yakety sax. But everyone's like, oh my God, she was amazing. I'm like, okay, I play saxophone. She was not playing that saxophone. It looked like she was, but she was going like this with her fingers. And I'm like, that is no fingering I've ever seen on a saxophone. No way. So I think it was a faked performance, but I'm here for it. But all I'm saying is I want to translate this into... for those of us that follow Trixie's career, Trixie, if you're listening, we want you to do a rhinestone-studded clarinet solo at one of your gigs.
Oh my God, that would be so good.
Make it pink, really make it rhinestoned. It's going to be great. I'm also a clarinetist.
Or a rhinestone harp. Like,
does she play harp?
Yeah.
Oh wait, the auto harp or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I thought you meant like a full fucking huge harp. And I was like, first of all, a harp is like $15,000 on top of the fact, that you just take like Swarovski crystals, shut it all out.
It's very gaudy. It's just a very, very gaudy harp.
Could you? I'm kind of here for this. I'm going to be 100%
cheetah print harp. That's what we need. Or zebra print.
I want I want some kind of like Elizabeth Smart looking ass to come out of nowhere and just be like, I am paving the way.
Honestly.
Is Elizabeth Smart the woman who was kidnapped as a child?
Yes.
And is like a prodigy of like, does she play harp?
See, okay, I'm going to be honest. When you said Elizabeth Smart, I did not know she plays the harp, but I was like, I don't know where this is going, but I'm excited to see where it ends up. Because
no, I'm pretty sure she plays like piano or harp or something like that, like really, really well. There's somebody who was when they were kidnapped. Part of that was because she was like some kind of child prodigy at some of this stuff. I thought maybe I'm twisting this in my mind. I was young when this happened.
Elizabeth Smart, if you're listening, tweet us. Let us know. How
many people? Well, first of all, we have already addressed Trixie, Dolly, and Elizabeth Smart. sorry. And we've only been live for 5 minutes. So, you know, our core fan base of Trixie, Dolly, and Elizabeth Smart.
Imagine having all three of them at a lunch just chit-chatting.
I want to be the fly in the soup in that conversation.
Oh my
I want to be
God.
drowning and dying and be going like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then just die.
All right. Anyway, sorry, we're getting distracted.
Super distracted.
Welcome everyone to Hot Mess Moments. My name is 8-Bit Dylan. I am a huge fan of Lost, but I've never seen The Nanny before. And my co-host is
Beth Dixon, also known as Augusta Wind 11. And I am like the hugest fan of The Nanny, but I have never seen Lost before. So we're watching each other's favorite shows for the first time, and we watch them together. So we do take the time to watch them with our mics muted, with very limited commentary, things like, what the fuck? Or something like that we'll say in between. But we don't talk about the episodes until we're here on the podcast. But that way we can see each other's facial reactions, and it's a lot of fun. We have 2 solid episodes to talk about today, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. This episode of Lost wasn't bad, in my opinion, as like a super fan of Lost, but it was not as good as I remembered it being. Like there was like, and I think it comes down to the writing of the episode because it focuses on one storyline for the most part.
It has one storyline with nuggets of that allude to other storylines without actually diving into those storylines. It's actually really one storyline that is cut into past and present for the most part. And then again, like it's important. We get some information about the Black Rock kind of, or potentially information about the Black Rock and that kind of thing. So then on the opposite side of the spectrum with The Nanny, this is an episode that I always enjoy watching. I think it's funny. And I don't think that it necessarily advances too much. I think in the episode itself, you're like, oh, shit's happening. And then you realize, it might not have happened. But I do think that there's some lingering effects of it. So I can't wait to talk about this with you today. Of course, we're talking about episode 15 of The Nanny.
I believe we're already there.
I know, which is called Deep Throat. And then we're talking about episode 14 of Lost, which was called...
it's called Special.
Special. Okay.
So I kind of want to get into this episode of The Nanny because my notes are very slim, but that was because I was so invested into the actual like episode itself. There was just so many good moments. I think this is the most Lucille Ball or Lucy Liu, if you're a fan of the pod.
If you're a fan of the podcast, you know that if we ever say Lucy Liu, we mean Lucille Ball.
Yeah. This is the most Lucille Ball episode that we've gotten yet. And I fucking loved it. It was so good. Okay, but before I like break it down, this is us covering The Nanny, episode 15, Deep Throat. Deep Throat.
She was there. That's how she became the nanny.
I can't wait to just go over. Also, wait. I'm getting all my wires crossed because I need to talk about real quick. This is the most fashion forward episode we've gotten yet. And in my opinion, there were so many potential outfits of the episode. I think that's why, like, I'm not even kidding. I think 40% of my notes is me talking about outfits. Because it's so good.
Between whom?
So I'm just going to point out all of the outfits first that really stood out to me.
Let's do it.
First one, this velvet brown, I don't know if it's gingham dress that Fran is wearing at the very start of the episode.
Yep.
Iconic. Love it.
It's so cute. I love that one.
The textural differences between the two different opposing patterns. I'm like, icon. Love it.
It's so good.
Second, CeCe's red business suit.
I love that red business suit.
It's so cute.
I thought this was going to be your outfit of the episode. When I watched it, I was like, I forgot that CeCe is serving in this episode.
So good. Like,
it's so good.
I didn't give it to CeCe, and I have a reason why.
Okay.
It's a really good reason.
Solid.
So I also want to call out CeCe's reunion outfit. That dress with those earrings, beautiful hair. I'm like, CeCe's really coming
little
for
shawl.
Fran today. Yeah, she's really coming for Fran today. The kids had some iconic outfits that they were wearing. I really liked Brighton's little suit that he was wearing, the red like little business suit. I thought it was really cute. But my personal outfit of the episode is the red, white, and black doctor outfit that are like when she's going to the doctors that Fran wears.
Yes.
And the reason it's my outfit of the episode is because it ties into Lost, because in the Lost episode today, they talk about what's red, white, and black all over. And when I saw that outfit, I was like, I have to make this the outfit of the episode.
Synergy.
It's Fran.
Synergy.
The answer to the joke is Fran.
I love that so much. I love that you brought that up, because I definitely didn't even make that connection or think of it. Because like I'm watching these having seen the outfits a billion times, so like I'm not making those connections necessarily. But I love that that's where your mind went, and I'm totally here for that.
I immediately saw, and I was just like, Lost. Like the connection.
I was going to hurt you if you had said the hospital gown with the fact that she was wearing leopard print slippers. No. I thought that's what you were gonna go for, and I was like, Dylan. Okay, but I'm happy with you. You're good.
So in terms of rating for this episode, I would give it a solid 9 out of 10, almost a 10 out of 10, which is weird because I still wouldn't put it in my top 5 favorite episodes.
I think that's fair.
I think I would rate it higher than some of the other episodes that I have put in my top 5. But I think personally for me, this is just such a solid episode in terms of physical comedy and in actual jokes that are said. And there's like so much I want to talk about. So let's get into this real quick.
Let's do it.
So we start off in this episode with all of the kids being sick with something. We're not sure, probably just a common cold. And they're ringing all these bells because they're like, we need the butler and the nanny here because we want like ice cream and we want water or juice. Whatever they want. And I think it's starting to come to terms that like Fran loves her job. She loves the kids tremendously, but also like hates her job in the same aspect because she's like, I don't get enough me time anymore. And I'm like, well, you're on the clock, girl. Like,
the best part about this is like seeing the stark difference between Niles and Fran as domestic like servants of a household, where Niles is constantly working and Fran is always finding ways to like bring the kids in with what she wants to do. Like, I want to get my hair and nails done, so I'm going to bring the girls with me. Like stuff like that. That's just like, so it's Fran is all about finding ways that is like, oh, I don't have a traditional 9-to-5 job anymore, and kind of exploiting that. And that's what I think is one of my favorite little themes of like this series, is seeing the difference between Niles and Fran as employees of the house.
Totally. There's like a complete difference. I'm going to talk about something right now.
Okay.
While I love Niles, and we discussed this very briefly. Very briefly. I have an issue with how they're writing Niles in the later half of season 1.
Yeah.
So I called out Gracie before for being a one-note character, where all of her jokes were centered around the fact that she had a lot of mental health issues. They have since strayed away from that in the later half of season 1 to where Gracie is more of this like innocence. They like make fun of like her innocence, which I think is hilarious. And it shows a few different layers. Niles is like great. Love Niles. We've only seen 2 real sides of Niles. The super horny side of Niles and just the real asshole-ish shade throwing Niles. Don't get me wrong. Love the shade throwing Niles, but I am getting a little tired to the point where I am predicting what Niles is going to say before he actually says it. And that happened a lot this episode. So like CeCe would say something and I'm like, I already know the punchline to this joke because like I've understood how Niles speaks, and I want, and I'm hoping going forward into season 1 that the jabs at CeCe are a bit more creative. There was a few really good ones in here. One specific one I wanted to call out was specifically Niall saying, "At least when I offer something, people take it." And I was like, oh shit, that's really shady.
But I think that part of this is, you know, and part of the conversation to give the audience some context of what we're also talking about. We watched this with our friend Stefanduck and with Dylan's husband, Nigel, and they were kind of saying, well, like, CeCe's really not that bad, but CeCe's the one that's setting him up for punchlines for kind of digging at him a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that she's just sitting there being innocent. Now, there are times where we've seen her say something innocent to Maxwell or something in business, and then you see Niles jump in and say something, which I understand that point of view. Like, she didn't even do anything. Why are you, like, coming at her?
Yeah.
But the point of CeCe is that she's supposed to be like this entitled witch of a woman who has like in a 2021 lens, what we would probably say is, what's wrong with an assertive woman? However, she's not assertive, she's aggressive, and that is a very different thing.
Sorry, go on.
No. What I was just going to say with that is just, I completely understand that. There are definitely times where I'm like, okay, Niles, you're going in a little too hard. Just to provide some context for you and everybody else, in that interview I mentioned that came out a month ago or so with Danny Davis, they talked about how it was the role for him it was between him and this guy who was younger, who was well known, and I can't think of what his name is, and so I apologize, but he was well known within like the TV world, so this would have been a breakout role for him. But the reason why they didn't go with him is that they felt like they would have to like make Niles a bigger character, and that there's no question about it. This is Fran Drescher's show, and Fran Drescher's character has to be the center. And he said that you could tell that within the first 2 seasons, they played around with Niles's character to try to figure out what sides of different shades of jokes can we go with that are funny, add to the comedy of the scene, but don't necessarily advance the plot, because he's not the center character, nor is his character in relation to Fran something that moves her character forward. So they talked about it like that. So I will agree with you that he's very one note, but I will also say, and this is potentially a spoiler, but it's a sitcom, and it's not so much that it's a spoiler as much as just how the show like grows. Yeah. He did mention that Lauren Lane, who plays CeCe, told the writers at the end of season 2, you have to give me some comebacks. This is coming to a point where it's just like a guy attacking a woman. And even if she somewhat deserves it sometimes, I need some material and that kind of thing. I like to actually, just to make one last point about this too. Yeah. I've always equated CeCe and Niles as being kind of and I don't know if this is true or accurate, but in my mind, this is, as being kind of the inspiration to a certain extent of Jack and Karen from Will and Grace.
Totally. I completely see that.
Where they are the side main 4 adult characters in a show. Their whole presence is relatively one note. Jack is a dumb, like, actor, unreliable, kind of funny, flamboyant kind of guy. And that's like all he does throughout the entire series. And Karen is like a drunk, like, you know, horrible, like, witch of a rich woman, like, you know, Republican kind of thing, whatever. And that's their shtick. But they found ways throughout the series of Will and Grace to give them some dimension. The same thing is going to happen with both of these characters too. But it is very one note for the first season.
Yeah, I also want to go back to I disagree. I don't think CeCe is assertive or aggressive. Okay. I think CeCe is currently in her state pathetic. The way that they write her is she's not like aggressive with anyone. I haven't seen her once like attack a character in the show. I've seen her like
that is absolutely false.
I've seen her like throw shade. I've never seen her like yell at anyone, and I've seen her like not care for the kids. but I've seen
That's
her.
again, we have seen her yell at people though.
Who?
We've seen her like the kid that was tap dancing, beat it, you on the troll, like in like,
I guess, yeah, I guess, yeah.
She's yelled once at Niles and she's yelled at Nanny Fine once so far, and just like with like a raising the voice kind of thing.
Okay.
But all of that said, she's not the only one who has yelled or had her voice raised or everything like that. But I will just
No, you're right. So the point I'm trying to make is that while I get that like CeCe's character is meant to be this like person that has jabs thrown at them, I really appreciated this episode specifically because we're seeing more into CeCe's character and why she's as pathetic as she's been kind of written to be, because for her, status is very important. And in this reunion that she is going to attend, it's not that, well, she probably does have feelings for Maxwell. It's more so the status of being married and having kids and fulfilling a purpose that is more important to CeCe than success in her career.
That is absolutely the core of who CeCe is.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And so I really appreciated that because for me, it gave more context into like CeCe's character, where she isn't just someone who is thirsty for Maxwell and isn't catching a hint. It's that her goal in life is to literally get married, maybe have kids just for the sake of having kids, just to have that be a symbol in her life, and then to succeed in any way, shape, or form that is a symbol of status. And so I really liked this episode for CeCe, even though like she obviously wouldn't be MVP for me, but I really thought it was really well done, like how they did CeCe's character and how she got like drunk at the reunion. I thought it was super silly. So basically the context of this episode, or like the story of it, is Fran takes Gracie to the doctor because the sickness that Gracie has might be a little bit more severe than the rest of the kids. But when she gets to the doctor's office, she learns that her throat is actually the one that's sick. Like she's kind of like sniffly and like something's off. And the doctor's like, you need to get your tonsils taken out because they're like swollen, and you know, getting your tonsils taken out as an adult is not an easy thing.
Right.
So it's much easier when you're like a kid. And so she's like definitely afraid to get her tonsils out, as she should, because it's not like an easy process when you're an adult. I also
it is painful.
Yeah, it's very
Have
painful.
You had your tonsils out?
I got them out when I was like 10.
Okay. See, I want to get my tonsils out. Is that weird? I'm like, can someone just take them out for me? But the reason being is anytime I have a sore throat, they really do enlarge. And sorry if this is gross, but I do get tonsil stones, and they're like, first of all, they suck. And second of all, they cause bad breath. And so the last thing that's why I was so happy with masks for the last year and a half. Cause I was like, you know what, if I have a tonsil stone and I can't get it out cause it's really lodged in there, I don't have to worry about people smelling my breath, which I don't think my breath is that offensive or anything, but still I'm just like,
every single podcast, we learn a different layer to Beth's character.
I know. This podcast is less about us learning about the characters in the shows and more about learning about Dylan and myself as we go along in life.
So we learned that she needs her tonsils out, and I want to call out that I thought it was really funny that she's stealing stuff within the doctor's office. Thought that was a hilarious, very Fran thing to do.
Yep.
Again, physical comedy. We're seeing so much physical comedy in this episode. But I also really want to call out, and I didn't say it earlier in this podcast, an outfit that almost won outfit of the episode for me was when she goes to the doctor's for the first time, the hospital. Maggie comes in with this pink shirt and these jeans and this beautiful hair. And I'm like, oh my God, Maggie is serving right now.
Maggie looks so good in this episode. And you know, even right now, I understand the color palette, but I can't visualize the specifics of her outfit. But I do remember when she walked in being like, oh girl, you look so cute.
It made her look so much older. Like, I don't know how old the actress was like when they filmed this. you could have told me that she was like 21, 22, and I would have believed it just based off her outfit and like how her hair was done. I was like, work, love this. Until she opened her mouth, then you'd be like, oh, okay, she's a child. I then want to talk about kind of moving forward. So we're getting to this scene with the hospital food. And I just need to call out this scene because it's like the first real physical comedy moment that really was hilarious to me. Like I like solid Lucille Ball vibes was her just like, I'm not supposed to eat. Oh, maybe I'll just give it a taste. And then she's like just shoving turkey in her mouth. And
so as someone who has had a few surgeries over the past couple of years, like I'm like, girl, don't do it. Don't eat. No.
Yeah. Not only that, but don't eat because the food's awful.
Well,
like,
that too. Who eats turkey? Why is that the thing that you go for out of everything? If there was a cookie, that's where I would go.
Of course. Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Cookies are like pizza. Like, even if it's bad, it's good.
Totally. Like, I loved this scene. I thought it was so funny. And then with the remote control trying to turn on the TV, I was like, oh my God, that woman just died. Like,
that woman was folded in half.
I was like, damn, she's flexible. You better work, old woman. Like,
I actually wonder how they did that.
She probably just like put her butt right where it folds and just folded her legs up. She could have been super flexible.
I know, but I'm also thinking like that was no spring chicken of an actress that was there. So I'm just thinking if they did that to me and I'm 32 with a bad back, I would have been like, no, don't do this.
Just like in the cushion, like,
and it's not like she's there for just a second. Like she's a solid, like, like
a minute. Like I almost felt like a minute. She's like, I was like, damn, okay, work, girl. I loved it. This scene right here, specifically, if I could call out like, this is kind of me being dramatic, top 5 scenes within The Nanny, this would be probably in my top 5.
Okay.
Just because it really sold the fact that Fran, if she's by herself, can sell a scene. Yeah. Like Fran Drescher is just an icon. And I think this scene like proved that because she didn't need anyone else to kind of volley off of in order to like make the scene funny.
She volleyed off of a woman who was sedated in bed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, well, and I will point out, she did do like the epitome of a Lucy Liu action, which was to go like that with her body, which if you're listening, I hope that you could visualize that. Just kind of like
yeah, it's true.
We just kind of go like back and forth like with her arms and everything, just have that moment where she's kind of like, oh no, which way do I go? I'm gonna sit on my bed. Like that is very I am actually pretty sure Lucille Ball did that exact movement multiple times in I Love Lucy.
And it's all in the face too. Fran's very good about face acting. And I just loved it. So I just had to give some praise to that specific scene. And then
can I make a comment about that actually?
Yeah.
What I love about The Nanny, and so I'm also a huge fan of the musical The Producers. Okay. And one of the commentary from that musical for one of the scenes, which is the Keep It Gay scene, is that when you listen to the commentary over it with the director, she says, what I love about this scene is watching these 4 Titan actors of Nathan Lane, Roger Bart, Matthew Broderick, and Gary Beach, watching their eyebrows. They know exactly how to use their eyebrows in a lot of different ways. And that adds to the comedy. Yeah. And if you watch The Nanny, Niles, CeCe, Fran, and Mr. Sheffield all can act with their eyebrows, and they all do it in very different ways. And so face acting to me, like they do the epitome of it in especially this episode. And Fran, I think, is the best out of all of them, but I just wanted to point that out.
I mean, if we're talking about eyebrows, I think Maxwell's got some killer eyebrow acting. Oh, yeah. Like he's so good about that because he can like come off as like a aloof yet stern father just from his eyebrows. And
I totally agree.
I think it's really, really well done.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to like the back and forth where it flips between CeCe and then it flips to the family post surgery. with Fran, where she's like loosey goosey, and
before that though.
Oh yeah. What happened?
So before that, we have this kind of gag where with this nurse that comes in and like is doing everything wrong, like completely against the law or whatever. So she gets Fran sedated, and then she makes Niles like sign the form.
Yeah.
And so while Fran is sitting there sedated, she's talking to Niles and to Sheffield the entire time. And she tells Sheffield, I love you, before she gets wheeled away for surgery. Yeah. And so that's important before we go into the post-surgery.
For sure. And then it's also super important to like know how Maxwell reacts to hearing that. He seems very excited and happy to hear this. But I am so glad that we learned by the end of the episode that she was not being authentic with saying that, because I was like, this is such a huge jump for her character, because like up until this point, she's never really shown like a true interest in Maxwell. Right. It's more of like oh, you're cute.
Like a little flirtation here and there, but nothing serious.
Yeah, not to the point of love. Same with Maxwell. Like if Maxwell was like, I love you, I would have been like, I don't know if you love her, but you've definitely shown definite interest in wanting to be in a relationship with her.
Right.
And so I really appreciated that the last scene, 'cause I was going to call it out if they kept this in and that it wasn't a gag. I was like,
I watched your face too, because I was like, I knew it was about to happen. And I don't know if you caught me, but I couldn't help but go like,
yeah, I saw it. You gave me that look like, I know exactly what you're about to say. Like, yeah.
And you were like, okay.
Yeah, I was like, this is weird, but I'll take it.
All right. And then when she comes out of the surgery, Maxwell has this whole like basically conversation with Niles, where he's going, well, the poor woman, she's been pining away all this time, and I didn't even know. I should have picked up on the signs, but poor thing, I can't
help it. She can't help it.
Yeah, she can't help it. That's what I love to. I do think that this episode, more so than any other episode so far, except for maybe one, we really get, besides the Nanny episode with Maxwell's Nanny, we get a lot of, how does Maxwell feel about himself and in his relation? And this is
very hot.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because he's like, I'm hot. He doesn't say that, but like he basically is like, I'm hot, and I know that she can't help but like me, but that I can't do anything like about. It's just so funny to me.
Yeah, it was really ridiculous, and it actually says a lot about his character, because he has shown that he's confident, but now we're learning he's cocky as well, where he is very cocky in the sense that like if someone says I love you, it's because, oh, well, of course they love me. Why wouldn't they? And so I thought it painted his character in a different light, which I appreciated. But in this specific scene, we also get scenes of CeCe, where CeCe is at this reunion, and they've got these like two other sorority girls, ex-sorority girls who were part of the sorority with CeCe, who are kind of like talking about their lives and like, oh, I got married, and like, oh, my kids, and
my kids are great. Work at the UN, you work at NASA. It's just
yeah. And CeCe's just like, oh, fucking kill me. Like, I'm over this. Like, she is completely like waiting for Maxwell to show up. And I did feel kind of bad for CeCe here a little bit, because Maxwell did in the previous scene say he was going to come and show up like after the hospital. But I also like relate to Maxwell. It's like, you want to check in on Fran, make sure she's fine. This is a pretty big surgery for someone that's like an adult. And you just want to check up on her. And so I also thought it was pretty shady of CeCe to just be like, don't stay at the hospital and come like hang out with me. Like I
really feel like there was a very simple solution to this, which is that he goes with her in the beginning and leaves early to go back to the hospital. Yeah. But obviously what they're trying to show here is Maxwell choosing between a business partner that he's, who's been pining for him for a long time, and the woman who's been working for him for a short amount of time, but has grown to be a mother figure to his kids.
Yeah. And this is really good. I forgot the name of the actress that plays CeCe.
Lauren Lane.
So Lauren Lane does phenomenal here in the scene where she's getting punched and she turns the two girls against each other, where she's just like, do you remember that time back in, I can't remember where, she's like,
Barbados, that week in Barbados with Brad or whatever the guy's name is. My Brad? And she's like,
and she just
did you not know about that? Whoops.
Yeah, whoops. Oh my God, dead.
I looked up and you went, whoops, without
whoops.
Whoops. She's so good.
It's so good. Lauren Lane, you got my heart. You're so.
You know
so
what? I'm going to put this out there. As a fellow woman with a lower voice, I love Lauren Lane's voice. I love this earthy, no nonsense tone that she has. It's so like, she's so smart with how she does it. She adds this whole upper class aspect to her voice in her tonality, while also trying to give it some earthy sexual feeling in it. Like, I mean, it is so good. Like, I love Lauren Lane. And here's the thing. She teaches, I believe, theater and acting at a university in Texas. And she said, every semester I start off in the first class, there's a whole bunch of students that go, were you CeCe Babcock? And she was just like, yes, let's get it out of the way. That kind of thing. Imagine how gagged you would be. You walk into your class and you're like, my professor was CeCe Babcock.
For real? That'd be sick.
And then she's like, and then they all worry that they're gonna get, failed in my class because I'm gonna like fail them because I'm an awful person or something. And I'm like, fair enough. I'd be intimidated. I'd be like, holy shit.
I was like, the CeCe Babcock. I also want to talk about, just very briefly, I thought it was really funny when Fran is on the drugs and she's listing off things that she's going to give to people if she dies during the surgery, and says, Mr. Sheffield, you can have me. And I'm just like,
Mr. Sheffield, and you can have me.
And then the look on Maxwell's face, like,
The look on Niles's face is great. He's just like,
he's like, well, we better work, girl. So then we get post-surgery, tonsils have been taken out, and then there's that like brief scene where Maxwell actually goes to see CeCe at the reunion, and she's hammered and by herself. Then we get this last scene.
That's not true. There's a cleaner there.
There's a cleaner there. That is true. We get this last scene where it seems that Niles got sick, whatever the kids had, and then Fran is laying on the couch, post tonsils out, so she can't really speak. And CeCe comes in and is like, this is my moment to kind of rub it in Fran's face. And so I loved this because she's like talking to Fran, knowing Fran can't speak back. And it's so stupid where she goes to drink the juice and just like, that's not juice.
She writes on her board, that's not apple juice.
Yeah. Which then brings up the question, is Fran peeing in a bottle and just having it chill? Like,
I think it is apple juice, that kind of thing. But I just love the idea that she just pissed in like a weird hospital bottle that just is next to her on the couch.
Yeah. And then she just, has it chill there. Loved it. Thought this episode was great.
And I do love that now the three kids are in charge of taking care of the two domestic staff members.
Yeah, they're like,
and like with the bells. Who decided to give them it's like the same dialogue from the beginning of the episode. It's a nice little close. It's a kitschy like 90s sitcom moment, but it's still fun and effective. Like it doesn't take away from anything,
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. And I loved this episode.
It's a good one. Now, I had one question for you. I want to go back to something that you said in the very beginning.
Yeah.
You said something about Gracie being very one note, and now they've kind of painted her in another way. Do you think that they did that because they realized, this is genuinely, I'm asking you, not because I'm trying to lead you somewhere. Do you think that they did that because they realized that she was one note and they wanted to change that? Or do you think that they wanted to potentially paint the growth that she's had since Fran has been around?
I think neither. I think the reason that they did this was because Gracie is a character that she can fill the scene that's needed. So they need someone who's innocent in this scene. So we're going to use Gracie because she's the youngest. I don't think Gracie, until way later when she gets older, is ever going to have a character growth that's meaningful enough to where we are going to be like, oh, that's something I've never known about Gracie. I don't think we're going to get that until much later. because the focus right now is on like Maggie. It's focused on Fran and Maxwell's relationship. And it's also focused on like potentially CeCe's relationship with like Maxwell. I think those are like the 3 main beats that we're getting in season 1.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of Brighton and Maxwell's relationship as well as like a son and father relationship.
I was actually, continue.
I was gonna say, I think Gracie's just kind of on the back burner for season 1 and she just fills the role that's needed.
I think that makes a lot of sense. My one argument is that I think that Brighton is more one note than Gracie is, because we at least have seen a few different shades of Gracie. We have only seen Brighton in one real capacity, which is I'm the comic relief young character who says things that are mean to his sisters, mostly Maggie, and I am an entitled little rich kid who thinks he has a sense of humor. That's kind of what we get out of him.
I would say the one counterpoint to that is we have seen Brighton be vulnerable because he was such a hard ass in the first episode, and then we learned he's got some vulnerable moments. He does, in fact, rely a lot on Fran, and he does rely a lot on Maxwell. And despite him wanting to go down his own path, really does love and respect his father, which I appreciated. Like, I think like in that capacity, I think we have seen some growth from Brighton.
That's true.
Because while Brighton is a comedic character, we learn more about Brighton through other characters' actions, such as how Maxwell treats Brighton. But with Gracie's character, it's always been she's either said something about her mental health, or we've learned that she relies a lot on Fran. But we have it's weird. So when it comes to like character growth for Gracie, it's more of she is a tool to help excel other people's characters. So she has helped showcase how good of a father Maxwell can be.
Or as bad one.
Or as a bad one. She has shown that Fran really does care about the family like a lot because of like stuff that she's done. Less so about like what has Gracie done to contribute to the family. It's more of what has the family done to contribute to Gracie.
I think that's a very fair point. Very fair.
And so that's where I'm hoping that we get a little bit more going forward.
Cool.
Now, my MVP for this episode, hands down, is Fran.
Yeah. It
good.
Can't be.
Just top tier talent.
Yeah.
My LVP, everyone was pretty good this episode. I would maybe say LVP would go to, I don't know.
I have a very specific LVP, but I want to hear yours first.
I was like the nurse, but
honestly,
she was pretty good for the role. It's hard because I could choose an LVP based off the plot, but I could also choose it based off comedy, which I've flip-flopped between that throughout our podcast. I think actually I'll give the LVP to Maxwell.
That's my LVP.
Because he didn't really he kind of treated CeCe like shit as a business partner, and it was very full of himself this episode.
That's exactly why I was going to make him an LVP. All things considered, he's almost like the default LVP. It's not like you actively think in this episode, wow, Maxwell's the real bad guy. It's But
yeah, that was episode 15, Deep Throw. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really solid. Definitely in the top 10 for sure.
And I believe the next episode is called Schlepped Away. What do you think that would be about?
Schlepped Away. I'm going to... okay. I'm going to make a weird guess here. I'm going to guess that Maggie wants to get a part-time job. And this is just a weird rabbit hole I'm going to go down.
No, I'm here for it.
Maggie wants to get a part-time job, and she has no responsibility. And so she is going to have to learn responsibility from Fran and Maxwell and stuff like that. And it's called Schlepped Away because she never shows up on time for anything. And she's always, she hasn't been very responsible. And so that's the whole maybe.
So you have seen the next episode. No, just kidding. It's nowhere close.
I tried.
No. But we'll let you just watch it and figure it out. But I kind of thought it would be funny if since we don't really have like centric episodes anymore for the nanny, it'd be fun to like, instead of me trying to figure out who the next episode is going to be about in Lost, if I give you the title of the next episode and you have to try to figure out like what the next one is. So I'm thinking, let's put that in the rotation.
Yeah, let's do that.
But very cool. Yeah, cool. I like this episode a lot.
So next, let's get into Lost, episode 14, Special. Previously on Lost.
I'll tell you what's special.
What?
This episode.
Oh.
This episode is special because it's very different format-wise, I felt like, from the other ones. We've kind of discussed this a little bit already. This is an episode where it's really only one major storyline, which is about Michael and Walt, a little bit of Locke, and, well, a lot of Locke, and a little bit of Boone, with appearances by Sayid and Jack and Kate and Charlie.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's really good. We get a little bit of a storyline with Jack and Kate and Charlie, and we get a little bit of a storyline with Jack and Sayid. I'll get those out of the way, and then we can get into the meat potatoes of the episode. Overall, though, I think that this episode was interesting. I don't think I would call it my favorite in the world, but it was a solid episode. I thought the writing was really good. It clearly brought up a little bit of anger in me because I was swearing up a storm at a few times in the episode. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. Not because it's bad, but because I think it was really solid. It's not an episode I think I'm ever going to go back and be like, we have to watch this. But it was filled with action. It was filled with a lot of emotion. And I felt like, again, this was a different kind of flashback episode. And I really kind of enjoyed that for what it was. I just don't think it was necessarily as strong as some of the episodes that we watched. Yeah. So just to quickly kind of go over Charlie and Kate and their kind of storyline. In this storyline, Charlie is looking for Claire's stuff. Somebody moved it, and he, I think, is specifically looking for Claire's diary. The reason for that is because I think he just wants to get in her head and kind of see if there's some kind of connection or something like that, I think there. Okay. They find out that Sawyer has the diary. Charlie punches or hurts Sawyer right where his stab wound is. Yeah. Sawyer turns around and punches him, and they grab the diary and walk away from Sawyer. And then there's a scene that lasts way too fucking long.
It's so awkward.
It is like, did you see me being like, yeah, okay, like, come on, let's hurry this up. Where Charlie takes out the diary, goes to read. Now I'm not going to read it. No, I'm going to read it. No, I'm not going to read it. No, I'm going to read it now. I mean, it went on for literally a minute. Yeah. And I was like, this is not actually necessary. So basically, we do see that later he is reading the diary. And we see a couple of things. One, on one page, she says, I hate him. And I don't know who him is, but I thought that was important.
I felt like what the I hate him was off island, because it was like referring to the psychic. Like, or
okay. I didn't catch the other part of it. I just saw the I
felt like I feel like he was flipping through until he got to the part with the island.
Gotcha.
And then he found the section where she was.
And then she wrote about Charlie in another page and said, like, I feel really safe and secure, or even in like this dark, scary place with him. And that she said that she's starting to develop feelings for him. And then he turns the next page, and there's something that's like really big there. So he comes over and talks to Jack and Sayid and says, hey, she mentions that in her dreams that there's this black rock that she keeps going to in her dreams. And he said, didn't you say something like the French woman kept talking about a black rock? And that leads into Jack and Sayid's story, which was that basically, and slightly Shannon, they're putting together these maps and realize that they kind of overlay on top of each other to make this triangle, and that the coordinates may actually just coordinate to one particular place on the island, which might be the quote unquote black rock, which is what Rousseau mentioned. and that we've been kind of talking a little bit about where it could be. And Saeed tends to think that maybe this is where the transceiver signal is coming from, or like this is the power source of the island and that kind of thing. So now I have kind of a theory that the Black Rock, I thought last episode could have been that waterfall.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to realize I think that was an inconsequential kind of place. However, I still think it's like, did Kate and Sawyer just not tell anybody that there's a whole other thing of fresh water, potentially another place? And if you want to bathe in something that isn't salt water or like our drinking water, let's maybe.
I can't remember if they keep it a secret or not. And I can't remember if the waterfall shows up again. In that, like in a bigger storyline capacity. But
now I'm thinking, I thought maybe the Black Rock was like a high point on the island initially, and that triangle could represent a mountain. So it could be a peak.
Yep.
Now I'm wondering if the Black Rock is in the hatch.
Okay.
So that it's underground, not actually above ground, which would be weird for a signal to come out of. But again, we have a polar bear in this episode and it's lost. So I'm not saying anything is normal or whatever.
Yeah.
So basically, now we have the connection of them trying to figure out what and where the Black Rock is. And now we also know that Claire was dreaming about this and that they only wanted Claire. That was something that they repeated in the preview for this episode that Charlie says when he gets back, that they only wanted Claire. So clearly there was some kind of destiny. I still now think that the psychic wasn't trying to help Claire. I think he was trying to hurt Claire. And I think he knew exactly what was going to happen. And they wanted the baby for whatever reason. The others, the whoever. And I think the psychic knows about them, whether he's from that realm community, made it to Australia or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't think the psychic's good.
Okay. No, that's interesting. So I guess my next question in relation to that is, if you think the Black Rock is in the hatch, what is the significance of the Black Rock?
I do think that there is something that it has to have some kind of, there was some kind of research team. So I don't think that people necessarily know what's there. They just know it's significant. So I think that there's something that's like, maybe there's secrets to the island itself. There could be, maybe it's like a fountain of youth. I don't know. I'm just pulling shit out of my ass now. But there's some, I think there's something to this that makes it like you understand the island a little bit better, that you understand your surroundings. It kind of gives you some sort of wisdom. But I don't think that it's necessarily, I think the reason why the hatch is there is that I think that Rousseau or somebody like that put it on top of whatever, if this is the rock or whatever's underneath of it, to keep people away from it. Because I think that maybe that's, you get filled with wisdom, but you lose something. I don't know. This is kind of like where I'm at with it.
Okay, cool. So I think that pretty much covers, there is one, it was interesting to see all three plot lines kind of do converge at the end, because Michael shows up in that meeting with Jack, Shannon, and Saeed, where he mentions how it's ridiculous that they are thinking about staying on the island. And he's like, we need to get off this island. We need to like build a raft. And I guess we can talk a little bit about that because it kind of has a connection, kind of doesn't, but to like the main plot. But we've learned that because Michael's an architect, he says it's going to be very easy for them to build a floatable raft because they've got seats that the cushions can float, and there's tons of bamboo, there's tons of twine that they can use to like create a solid raft that can get them off this island. So thoughts? I have two questions. First, if you were in Michael's position, would you leave the island after everything you've seen? And two, what do you think is going to happen?
So, one, I would, but I would not just go out and then that's it. What I would do is I would try to do little trips with the raft to see, does it float? What do we need to fix? All those different kinds of things. Yeah. And I would go far enough out with sight of the island that I could try to make my way back. Now, that said, you need to be able to bring plenty of water. You need to be, at the very least, bring some kind of fruit, bring some things with you, because you might get trapped out at sea. So I do think that it's important to do like test trips with the raft to make sure it's going to be sound and steady. And I definitely think that it would be important to make sure that you can still see the shore and feel like you have the capacity to get back. And you can't do it by yourself, and you can't just bring Walt with you. You have to be able to have a few people who can either take turns or whatever rowing, because there are going to be times where the ocean would be so rough and that kind of thing. I don't think it would work personally based off of my thoughts on this place, because I don't think you're really on Earth, or if you are, you're in some kind of realm or whatever. Like, I don't think like you just go through like a Wakanda sphere and you're like, oh, I'm actually in the Philippines. Like, I don't think that that's like,
could you imagine if that's what happens? They're like in the Bronx, like they just, it's just like they get on the raft.
You're in Diagon Alley in Harry Potter world, and you're like, what's happened here? You know,
like I'm just imagining them like rowing, and then all of a sudden they go from like water to in the middle of a street in Bronx. They're like, what the fuck? Like
just they appear and they're on the one train and they're like, what the hell? I'm on the local of all. No, that's a New York City Metro joke for all of you out there. On the note of New York City, as you can see behind me, if you're watching the video, my apartment is empty. I don't have a table there anymore. I don't have tables at all in my apartment. Wow. So there are lots of boxes and stuff and all that kind of stuff.
She's moving on out. This is the last podcast? I think
this is the last podcast. There we go. Of Hot Mess Moments filmed in this apartment.
Yeah, and then we're
next time we'll be at Branningham, and then it will likely be either at Branningham again, or we might have 2 weeks at Branningham. We might have 1 week at Branningham. We don't know, and then we'll be in New York. So very excited.
Cool, that's exciting.
Woo! But I will be doing 2 streams this weekend and a podcast for RHEP in this apartment. So that will wrap up.
Cool.
Everyone's view of my living room here.
So I have another question. So with us knowing that Michael is an architect and he wants to get off this island, he has influenced Shannon as well, because Shannon starts inquiring with Boone about, we should also consider getting off this island. There's no reason for us to be. And Boone is so asshole-ish to Shannon.
I love it.
Oh, yeah, totally. Based off what we've learned about Shannon last time, it's good to see that he's separated from her.
Yeah.
But we've seen he's acting very different now. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on like, do you think, because you had mentioned your theory that like maybe Locke is trying to influence him in some way, or like something of that variety?
I think this
do you think this is just character growth?
I think why not both? I do think that there's whatever the influence that Locke put on him, whether it comes from a place of bad or good. I'm not convinced that Locke still is this. Locke has either learned the secrets, quote unquote, of the island from a place of combating the others and potentially evilness of the island, or he's slowly turning into one of the others as well and influencing them. He clearly can see into, we will get to this with Walt, but he can see something with Walt. He saw something in Charlie. He saw something in Jack. It's like Boone is his new project. He sees the potential, and he sees that there's something to overcome with each of these characters. And he like basically plays like a guiding, principle there. So yeah, I do think that there's growth here. Again, if going along with what my theory is of this place, that it's some kind of purgatory setting, that, purgatory is a place, specifically where you're supposed to, it's not just a waiting place. It's a place where you like resolve things either for the better or the good or the worse. And that determines where you go afterwards. So there's this idea that maybe he's trying to help move people into the direction that's going to guide them wherever they need to go, essentially. So
by that logic, do you think then Shannon's damned?
I hope so.
This is silly. I love it. I love it.
Dead serious.
I love it. Dead serious.
Dead serious. Limbo serious. I think we haven't really gotten into Shannon's redemption too much. We've started to see somewhat of like her being able to see like, oh, I'm not useless. Let me put something to work here. I definitely do think that there's reasons why I understand why she is the way she is. However, and I will say this again, because you've been hurt gives you no reason to hurt other people, because you have, let's say, mental health issues or whatever the case might be, doesn't give you license to treat other people like shit. I'm not saying it doesn't happen or it's not a contributing factor, but you need to be able to take ownership of those things. We haven't seen her take ownership over the way that she has treated Boone or anybody else yet. I do see shades that could happen in the future. And I do think that this was a necessary first step for Boone to set those boundaries and kind of cut off his reliance on relaying everything to her and being her protector, because he needs to start living for himself, making decisions for himself and that kind of thing. Because if they ever do get off the island, he can't live for her anymore. He knows exactly what's going to happen. This was a necessary experience for him to potentially live. Just like it was a necessary experience for Charlie to live, to get off of heroin. Yeah. It was a necessary experience for Jack to get over this guilt of his father in order for him to be an effective leader or doctor or whatever. Like any of these things that these characters have been challenged with that Locke has helped with, it was necessary for them to live, whether they get off the island or even while they're on the island. So that's why I think that Locke is a complicated character. And I think that Lost is a show that's not necessarily about black and white, good and bad, even though we see black and white, good and bad. It really is about the gray. They might show you black and white, but it's about the gray. We all have gray inside of us. We all have tendencies to be bad and good, and it's how we mitigate those things. So that's why I think what Lost does a good job with. Cool. So let's get into the Michael Walt kind of story.
The meat of it all.
The meat and potatoes. So let's talk about the flashbacks first, and then we'll talk about the present day. So the flashbacks, we first see a younger Michael with his girlfriend who clearly does not want to get married to him. He's obviously offered and she has declined. She is pregnant. He's not working. She's in law school. And he was taking art classes or something like that, or was an artist. And he said that he's going to quit that so that he can get a good job while she's finishing up law school and try to provide for them.
He also said he was a construction worker on the side. So he was like in between construction jobs. And like my dad, my adoptive father, or sorry, not my adoptive, my real father also was kind of like that, where it's like, there's like some months where he's like not working at all, and there's some months where he's like insanely busy because of construction. So like it's just like that's how the field is.
And I would also say like do we know where he is in the United States?
I don't think it's ever revealed like where specifically Michael's from, but it is definitely like we know that Susan, who is Walt's mother, lives in Amsterdam and then eventually moves to Italy and then eventually moves to Australia. So like whatever job she has is taking her all over the globe.
And the reason why I asked is because if you work in construction and you're in a place where there's a winter, it's actually much harder to have work consistently throughout the year because of winter. So putting that out there. So we first see that. You see that he's really excited to be a father. You actually don't get a sense that like Susan, his girlfriend, is that excited to be a mother. I'm going to be 100% honest with you.
For real. Yeah. There is this like air of I am more excited for my job than I am for this baby that I have right now, which is valid. Like,
that is super valid. I know plenty of people, and I would like to challenge the notion that people who are expecting babies, specifically if they're the ones carrying a baby, need to feel like super excited and all that stuff. I need to challenge that because I've known plenty of people, mostly women, who have carried. I've only exclusively known women who have been pregnant. I don't actually know of any non-binary or men or anything like that who have carried babies, but I know that is very possible. So let's make that point there. But the women that I've known who have been pregnant, there's been quite a few of them who've said, I felt guilty throughout my entire pregnancy because I just did not feel bonded with this child until I gave birth. And like, as traumatic and awful as that experience can be for some women, like it actually was like, Oh my God. Okay. I get it. Like, amazing.
Totally. Yeah.
And I also want to challenge the notion that you don't even need to bond with your child the moment they're born. Like, there's going to be certain instincts and such that kick in, but you might not feel bonded until you're settled in your life with this child. So like, I just want to put that out there, that if whether you are a mother, father, a parent, guardian, whatever, you do not need to feel bonded from the moment. You do not need to feel 100% excited. You can feel nervous. You can feel whatever. And just want to lift some of that. I say this as a non-parent, but I just want to lift some of that guilt that people feel, because it's nobody's place to put that guilt onto you and to potentially make even more disastrous, like, postpartum experiences. So just putting that as a little soapbox message from Beth. But you do get the sense that Michael's really excited. It's the opposite situation of Claire.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because in this the beginning flashback, we're seeing how eager of a father Michael wants to be. He's so excited to finally be a dad, and you can tell he really loves Susan, and like this for him is the next chapter in his life. And it seems like Susan has other plans for what her next chapter is going to be. So then we get into the next flashback where Michael is playing with their, I think, 2-year-old son, or no, not even 2 years, because it's only been a few months.
He's definitely like an 8-10-month-old baby.
Yeah,
like,
he's like super young.
He's a super young baby. It's very clear that she has graduated from law school, and this is like her first job, and what she wants to practice in is international law. And she gets this offer to work in Amsterdam, and she's not asking for permission. She's telling him, I've taken this job and I'm taking the baby. And which basically is effectively saying we're taking a break because we were talking about how this really wasn't working. You can see even in this moment that Michael is like, I'm sure he's hurt about having this relationship come to an end, but he's more concerned about the relationship with his son. As any good, like, he's just honestly a good father. You can tell that he cares very deeply for his son and wants to be a part of his son's life. His son is about to be taken across the world, and he doesn't have the money to go visit. And apparently she's going to be paid a really nice salary. So this brings my first point up.
All right, here we go.
Susan girl, you have someone who actively wants to be a good father and a part of your son's life. And the fact that you did not marry him was premeditated, first of all, so that you could have the freedom to take this child away from him without having to face legal consequences for it, which good on you, because if he was going to be a deadbeat dad, that's a really good way to do it. This is clearly not a deadbeat dad. This is somebody who actively wants to be a part of his life, that is doing what he can to try to provide. And if you can provide and you've got the money and the resources, the least you could be doing is either A, bring him over and try to get some work with him, even if you aren't together as a couple, or B, make sure that there's a dedicated visitation plan where you are paying for him to come to the country and visit, period. And none of that was established in this. And so I feel very strongly about that people who have parented a child have access, if they are responsible, loving parents, they should not be separated from their children. It's traumatic for them. And as we can tell, it is also very traumatic for the children themselves.
Yes.
I'm very passionate about this.
As
somebody who has no experience again with parenting a child as such, I've seen aspects of this throughout my entire life with friends and family and such that have similar, not quite this extent, experiences. And I just feel very passionate about that.
I also feel like with this moment where Susan wants to take the child away, I'm very curious the legality of this. Is this legal? I don't know if you because they both are parents to this child, and even though they're not married, he is still the father of this child, and he's getting taken away internationally to another country where he can't visit his child. So part of me is like, how much of this is actually legal? And I mean, it might be, because I'm not a parent. So
I mean, that's why she said, and I don't know how accurate the legal part of this either is, but she's like, well, we're not married. And I'm the one with a big job and money, and you don't have a job. So
Yeah.
Even if you did want to take me to court, the law is not in your favor, which I do believe is actually true.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then we get to some time has passed, and I think the next scene after this is when he's on the phone, like on the pay phone, and he's calling up Susan, and he's basically like, hey, I want to talk to my son. I just want to know what's going on. And we overhear Brian, who is Susan's partner, speaking, being like, oh, is that him? Is that him? And Michael hears Brian, and he's like, what is going on? And this is where we learn that Susan wants to marry Brian, and that she's been seeing someone. Or no, they didn't marry. She's seeing someone, and they're seeing
hurt. Somebody, in that she and she says, you know, basically like, you know, we're pretty serious or something like that. And he gets upset and hangs up the phone and walks right out into the street and gets hit by a car. Which
poor guy.
Awful. Like, that's a pretty bad day.
Oh, that's
a bad 1 minute of your life.
That's going to be a bad year for him. Like,
well, and then we find out that the next flashback is him in the hospital. He's drawing, and he's trying to draw something for his for Walt's second birthday. We also, by the way, Walt is named after Michael's father, Walter. Yep. So he is, excuse me, sorry. He's drawing, like, I think it's supposed to be like him or somebody else in the hospital, like with like his leg in a cast, all that kind of stuff. And the nurse has that moment where she's like, what's, you know, black and white and red all over?
Yes, and the connection.
And the answer is Fran fine at the, no, I'm just kidding.
He's like Fran Drescher in this episode of The Nanny.
and then it cut to Walt at the end being like, that's dumb. And then Michael being like, that's not dumb. It's the outfit of the episode.
Based off Hot Mess Moments. That's going to air in 2021.
It's just the level of complexity that we get here would just be so great. Like, God, okay, I'll let it be. So then you see him drawing all the stuff, and it's obviously been a couple months since the accident, and we see Susan show up at the hospital. Yep. First of all, does not bring Walt. What the hell?
That
is fucked up. That is fucked up. I'm so sorry. Like, I don't care.
Manipulator. She's just a manipulator. That's
She's awful. I'm like, come on, Susan. So she, like, I admire you for being ambitious and having this career and all that kind of stuff. But she's also like, have you ever like considered what you're doing is only good for you and not for your son? No, he's trying to help his son, you dumb bitch. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, this is like, what is wrong with a child having 3 loving parents as a part of their life?
And she's like gaslighting the fuck out of him because he's like, I want to see my son. I want to see my son. She's like, that's not what's best for him. And
like, that is what's off, best for Susan. Him. Like, by the way, I'm changing her name to Karen. Like, I just like, Karen, calm down. No, actually, Susan is pretty funny. I feel like Susan is like good for the situation.
I also think it's really funny because it's just so how unself-aware she is, because
she's such a lawyer.
She's calling out Michael for not doing what's best for Walt, even though, and like, she's
not doing what's best for Walt.
Yeah, she's like, oh, it's in your self-interest. No, it's in your self-interest because you don't want Michael to be involved because you want this perfect family that, like, with Brian and you and Walt, which
no, continue. Sorry.
No, I'm just gonna say, like, it's ridiculous that she keeps icing out Michael because, like, from our perspective, it makes no sense. It makes no sense why she is so anti-Michael. And I'm curious if, and I truly can't remember if we learn more about why Susan doesn't like Michael as much as she has, because it direction-wise makes no sense. From our perspective, Michael's just a nice guy that wants to be a good father, and Susan's just a bitch.
Totally legitimate reasons, like, for a relationship. Like, if you just aren't in love with him, or like that is valid enough. It is not valid enough to keep his child away from him, especially when all he wants to do is be a loving dad. Like that to me is ridiculous. Also, let's bring into the key point here that she says the phrase, Brian wants to adopt him, which we find out is not the case. That once again, she has manipulated Brian into wanting to adopt. So what we really see here is that I hate to say this because like, I really don't like calling mothers bad people, but sometimes mothers be bad people.
No, there's awful mothers out there.
There's awful people out there. They're awful parents. Yeah. But she literally, I don't care if you're providing for your child in terms of money. Like the fact she just clearly isn't invested in this child the way that Michael would have been emotionally, you know, you can see that. So then we have a moment that I think is really interesting. It's a flashback that is a Walt flashback, not a Michael flashback, where they're in their house in Australia. And we have this moment where she doesn't feel well. And part of this is because, you know, she's been working too hard, blah, blah, blah. Well, we actually know this is probably a precursor. First of all, they're in Australia. And second of all, we know that she dies, that this is a precursor to something that's happening. You see Walt with the dog on the ground and he's looking at birds and he's saying, you aren't looking at me. And he's trying to get them to do something. And he's talking about the birds. And then all of a sudden a bird flies right into the window and breaks his neck and is just on the floor outside. And so Brian and Walt walk over to the window and look at it. And he goes, is it dead? And Brian says, yeah, I think so. And Walt just kind of shakes it off like, okay, whatever. And then just like turns and walks away. But you can see that Brian's like really concerned about this. So I want to talk about this for a second because
there's one element to this that I think is a big piece that you may have missed. The bird that flew into the window and died is the same bird
that's in the book.
That was in the book.
Yeah. And so it's almost like he summoned it kind of thing.
Like, what the fuck? Yeah, that's weird.
So this is what I think is interesting. Again, I want to revisit the theory that everybody who's on this island is supposed to be there because of something. Like they were all bonded for something. This plane is serendipitous. They were all supposed to get on this plane. We've seen that there are some people who weren't supposed to be on the plane who get on it. Jack. We have people who weren't supposed to be on it because they were going to leave people, Son, but then they decide to stay, that there was some kind of reason that they got onto the plane. And so the people who died on the plane are like the casualties of people who weren't supposed to be there. So Rose's husband, for example, not supposed to be there, but Rose is. And there's a reason why Rose has to be on the island, not her husband. So I truly believe that theory in my mind is as close to a fact as anything I can get.
Okay.
I truly believe that.
And I'm not saying your theory is correct, but to like corroborate it.
Corroborate. No, I can't say it. No, corroborate.
To corroborate it. So basically, fate and destiny are huge elements and themes of losses we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And the decisions of are your decisions your own decisions, or are they bigger handed
by a greater source,
by a greater fate? And whether or not like we truly have free will, and that's like always been a theme thus far in season 1, is whether or not we are here for a purpose. And people like Locke think absolutely we are here for a purpose, and people like Jack disagree with that, and they say we make our own path on this island. We can survive if we like work together, or otherwise we'll die alone. And so there's like two conflicting ideals that are kind of coming head to head. And I want to get into a little bit of like, what do you think Walt's special powers are? Because this is the first time that it's been kind of confirmed that there are like true supernatural elements outside of this island. So like in the universe of Lost, like we everything that's weird has happened on the island.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to see that there is weird stuff that happens within the universe that this show has created outside of the island.
And I do think it's important to note that this further strengthens that the psychic is that from Claire's story is either connected to the island, either as somebody from the island or whatever, or knows that there's these forces and is not just a crock of shit kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that to me, that's like a good, like, validating thing for that character.
For sure.
I think that, so we also see a small bit of this in the present day when Locke is showing Michael how to throw the knife and he tells him to visualize it. And I think that Locke has this ability. I think he does have an ability, whether the island gave it to him or he's always had this ability.
Yeah.
To look into what some people want and be able to like convince them to do things. And or make the decisions that are going to better themselves or whatever. And I think that's why we see him, not just because he like so desperately wanted to go on the trip in Australia, but I think that's like one of the few times where he hasn't been able to like really get through to somebody. And he wasn't able to get through to the girl on the phone that he thought he was going to bring on this trip. He's not able to get through to his boss. And I feel like he's like able to hone those skills in a way that he couldn't before on this island. So it's like he knows he had something and like now he's just in the element that allows him to do so, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I think that he now knows how to better bring out those abilities in other people. And clearly from the day one, he connected with Walt. And I think it's because he knew Walt was special. He also says the line to Michael in this episode, he's been through more trauma than anybody else on this island, which is weird for Michael to hear, I'm sure, because I think that Michael feels that he's had a pretty privileged life. I mean, he had a nanny, he's had all these really nice houses and such. But that really freaks Michael out too. So either Michael knows something or it enhances this weird thing that he was just warned about from Brian. So going back to the flashback really quickly, just to end this, like that portion, because there's really not much there. We learned that Brian comes and visits Michael in the US without bringing Walt again. What is wrong with these people? At the very least, Brian, you should be the one introducing him to his father.
Yes.
At the very fucking least. And the fact that Susan never gave his letters, like Michael's letters to her son, like this, what, honestly, worst parents for sure. It's going to come at no surprise that Susan is my LVP of this episode.
LVP for the season so far.
She's like, awful.
She's so awful.
Awful. So anyway, I don't know. Shannon's still LVP.
Yeah, Shannon is pretty shitty. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We see more of her. She's awful.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so then Michael goes to Australia. We learned that Brian didn't want to adopt him. He
only did it to appease Susan.
He did it to appease Susan. He doesn't really feel bonded with him. And you learn that he's scared of him because things happen with him.
Yeah.
And so Michael goes to Australia. He introduces himself to Walt. Walt really doesn't know who he is. You can tell that Walt is hurt by everything happening around him. My favorite moment of the episode was then he said, Michael goes, well, you can still bring your dog. And he goes, but it's not my dog. That's Brian's dog. And he goes, Brian said you could take him, which clearly Brian didn't say that. I was like, fuck off, Brian. We're taking your dog 100%.
For sure.
Yes, here for that. Also feel bad because now the dog's stuck on the island, but whatever. So
I also want to point out in that same flashback scene, Michael has a conversation with the nanny, and the nanny reveals that all of the letters that Michael had been trying to send to his son were locked away in this box. And so Michael takes it with him. And later in the present day, Michael finally gets that moment where he gives his son all these letters. It's a really emotional moment between Michael and Walt because Walt learns that his dad actually has been caring for him this entire time.
Yeah.
And the information has just been stripped away. And so for Michael, that's a huge moment because
it's huge.
In this flashback, instead of throwing Brian under the bus, Michael takes the burden and says, Brian cares a lot about you. And like, because I'm your legal guardian, I now have ownership. Instead of saying, Brian doesn't want to take care of you anymore, I am here. Michael being a really nice guy. He has no reason to be nice to Brian.
Because he doesn't need to traumatize his child anymore.
Because he cares about Michael.
He knows that what he's doing is already traumatizing, that his child has gone through so much. This is the moment where he can at least take some of that pain and put it onto him and try to lessen it a little bit. Yeah. So I definitely agree. I think that that's really powerful. And then obviously we know that they get on the flight to go back to the United States, go to LA, and whoops. Thanks, CeCe. So that's the flashback portion. Yeah. So now we need to talk about what happens in the present day, which we've talked about a little bit of this, but essentially in the very beginning of the episode, Michael can't find Walt in the jungle. He's looking for him. He's not at camp. He's not anywhere. And he comes across that Locke, which we've known for a while, has been trying to teach him how to like throw a knife or hunt or do different things, like kind of small little lessons just to survive. Locke gives him a knife and tells him, look at this knot here and really visualize it, and visualize before you throw the knife going into it. And Walt throws it and hits it dead on into the tree. And he goes, "Whoa, that was so weird. I did visualize blah, 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 blah." And what I think this is, again, is the bird situation. I think he was looking at the book and saw the birds and visualized it and was trying to get his parents to pay attention, and just like manifested this by going right into the window. So I do think that his power, which I didn't answer your question yet about it, but I will now. I think his power really has to do with being able to manifest something in his mind and make it happen, or a version of that happen. So, So that said,
I want to bring up, whose side are you on? Are you on Locke's side here or Michael's side here with this confrontation that happens where Michael pulls the knife out on Locke and is like, "Stay away from my son. Like, I don't trust you. You're weird." And Boone attacks him, and there's like a skirmish that happens. And I'm just, before I tell my point of view, I'm just curious what your point of view is on this.
As a parent, I would absolutely agree with Michael.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't care that we're in these really weird circumstances. I need to give you permission to give my child a weapon and learn how to use it. I don't think it was right for Locke to keep this from Michael, because first of all, it perpetuates, Locke knows that Michael doesn't like this relationship. So why keep things from him instead of just being able to say like, "Hi, I wanted to teach your son these things. You're welcome to join in on these lessons and supervise and all that kind of stuff." Yeah. But making it secretive, first of all, gives me predator vibes.
Yeah, fucking creepy.
I think it's super creepy. But I do agree also that if you're in these extenuating circumstances, it's important for somebody to learn how to defend themselves, or at the very least be able to do some basic survival stuff. So I don't think that it's bad that he's learning it. I think it's bad the way Locke has gone about doing it, and the way that Walt thinks it's okay to keep it away from his dad. Now, Walt also doesn't feel bonded with his dad yet. He doesn't really know him. So I also understand Walt seeking out a mentor, a parental figure, where he seemingly doesn't feel like he has one. So I can understand Walt's position. He's been forced to be taken by this man who he doesn't really know.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, but again, this is a child, and I'm so sorry. And yes, you should listen to your children and their feelings and such, but your children don't get to make these decisions for themselves.
Agreed. And I thought it was really interesting how after this specific scene, we go into Michael having this conversation with Son, and Son is basically like, "Are you doing okay? What's going on?" I don't know if like this story got shared, like that Michael had talked with Locke or what, but Son knows something. She's like, "Something's off. Are you okay?" And this is where Michael talks about how he doesn't want his son to grow up here. And he's like very adamant about that. Like, "I don't want my son to grow up here. This is a bad place for my son." And I don't know whether you got like a weird vibe from that, or if like he's just like, "I just don't want my son to grow up on an island."
I think that he knows that, first of all, I think that clearly Michael had an idea for his son. and nothing has ever gone the way that Michael wanted for his son. And now that he has the time with his son, I think this is more of I don't want him to grow up here. I want him to grow up with me in a place where I can properly take care of him and that I can properly keep an eye on him and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So yeah, and then that leads to Michael wanting to build the raft, which we discussed, and he makes Walt work with him, and he's trying to force Walt to help him out, and Walt's like, why do I have to help? And acting like a petulant little kid, which like, you know, I understand. And we find out that Walt really likes the photos or like the pictures in this comic book, the Spanish comic book.
Yeah.
And so Michael tries to take this as an opportunity to bond with his son. Is like, oh, I like pictures too, and that kind of thing. But then he won't listen to him. Yeah. And so he grabs the comic book and throws it in the fire and says, well, that was later. That was later.
It's later. That's later. Yeah. He just grabs it and is like, you're going to come help me.
You're going to come help me. So he forces Walt to come help him. And then, Walt then says, oh, I'm going to go get something to drink because he sees Locke and Boone walk by into the woods. And so he goes and finds them. And in the middle of Locke saying, your father doesn't want us to spend any time together. You really need to like, let me be and all that kind of stuff. Michael walks in on them and starts like freaking out. And that's when he throws the comic book in the fire.
Yeah. So there's two parts here. The first is that he's really rightfully pissed off at Locke because he's like, I literally just had this conversation with you earlier today. So like,
I don't feel bad. I feel like this is a situation where I can understand why he's pissed. Yeah. But Locke didn't do anything wrong here. He literally was telling him, go away. Like
true. But I think like Michael was so enraged that like, he wasn't going to listen to reason at that moment. I also think that what's really interesting from this part is where Walt kind of talks back to Michael and is like, you're not my father. I don't need to listen to you. And Michael's just like, well, it's like, do you want to fucking hate me? Because like, I don't give a shit whether you hate me, but I'm your father and you will fucking listen to me. And like grabs that comic book and throws it in the fire. And this gets through to Walt, and Walt listens to him. Thoughts on that? Does
he listen to him though? Because he immediately runs away.
He does immediately run away, but he does stop. Like he does stop
in that moment,
walking back to his father.
And is this also when he says, you don't care about me because you haven't been a part of my life and such? It's in that moment, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, honestly, this wasn't a shocking situation. I kind of figured this is where this was going to go, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
I want to bring up one relatable moment. So I was in a similar position to Walt in my life. So I didn't learn who my real father was until I was 10 years old. So my mom had been with my adoptive father, and then they got married, and then he adopted me, but pretended to be my real father for the first 10 years of my life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I always had like an idea that who I thought was my real father wasn't actually my father, because my mom and my adoptive father broke up when I was like 2 years old. Like I was still, no, not even. I actually got 2 years old. I was around 2 years old. And so my adoptive father, being the really nice guy that he was, continued to take care of me, even though my mom and him had separated. And so like I saw him like every weekend. He treated me as if I was like a biological son of his, and lied to me throughout my life that I was a biological son of his, until eventually like I was getting around 9 or 10 years old, and I started noticing I was being treated very differently by my adoptive father's family. Like they were nice enough. They would always consider me part of the family in the sense they would give me like Christmas gifts and stuff like that. But my adoptive father ended up getting into a relationship with another woman, and they had biological children. And those were my brothers for a little bit until they started getting treated way nicer and way better than I was, because I was this like weird kind of plague on the family, because neither my adoptive father nor his wife were my biological parents. So they're like, why are we taking care of this kid? Let's try to build a life together. And so eventually, my mom let me know when I was 10 years old, because I was having this like difficult relationship with my adoptive father. And I was just like, I don't really get along with him that much. I feel very ousted from this family. My mom's like, well, your real father has been asking about you for the last few years.
Wow.
And I feel like you're old enough we can have that conversation. Your adoptive father's not your real father. And so I was like super excited about this, because I had always felt like othered than, and my real father was so nice. Like, he was like, I was so accepted within the family. I met my true brothers and sisters. It was really like a really fun moment. But I remember, similar to Walt, it was very difficult for me to accept discipline from my real father, because
understandable.
I had not grown up around him. So whenever I would do something, like I'd go over for the weekend and we do like yard work at my dad's place, and I got tired, I'd go inside. He'd be like, no, get outside, go mow the lawn. I told you to mow the lawn. And I'm like, I don't want to. Like, well, I like, why don't you understand that? He's like, well, you're going to mow the lawn. I'm telling you to do it. And so it took me a while to like understand that
he's a parent.
He's a parent. He's my father. And I didn't notice that when I first watched this episode of Lost. I never made that connection. And as I watched this, I was like, oh shit, I relate so much to Walt in this moment, because like if me and my real father, and I say real father, I should just say biological father. I have no connection to my adoptive father now, just for context. That's why I say real father. So my biological father, if I had been on an island with my biological father, we would probably have the very similar.
Especially if you had just met him how many weeks beforehand.
Agreed. Now, mind you, me and my biological father hit it off very quickly.
Yeah.
And I also have like the added context of I was gay, and he didn't know I was gay, and I wasn't out yet. So there's like a whole nother layer to this equation. But I just thought it was really cool to see this like develop into a show that I really, really love, and realize how similar I was to one of the characters.
Absolutely.
Which I thought was really neat, and how they like covered it and talked about it. The Susan is like I called her evil stepmother. That was on my adoptive father's side. So I felt like I knew that Susan when I was growing up.
I have other friends who have had similar situations. Actually, my sister-in-law has had somewhat of a similar situation as well. And I think that this story is one that's really important to incorporate into these kind of shows. And so, I mean, not for the trauma of being on a lost island and all that other stuff, but I think it's, we have this idea since especially the 50s of this nuclear family, and that is just so not the norm in so many families across the United States. I have been incredibly blessed and lucky to have quote unquote, like the nuclear family kind of feel where both my parents are together and were married for a few years before they had me and my brother. And as far as I know, I don't think either one of them have had an affair and have other kids somewhere else or whatever. And, it's just, but we need to get in our heads that family is not just blood. And sometimes it is. And I mean, that we honestly choose our family. And I know that we say that more, especially during Pride Month when we talk about queer families, but just in general, like family is who you choose. And you could be related to people by blood, but that doesn't necessarily make you their family. It just means that you're related. So.
No, absolutely. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of go over some other aspects of this episode. So
sounds good.
So Michael Walt runs away, and we don't really know why. I think Walt just like runs away with Vincent into the jungle, and Vincent and Walt get separated by something. We're not sure why. I just assume Vincent just kind of runs off and does.
Well, we hear some kind of growling, rumbling, and Vincent gets upset, runs off.
Oh, that's right. And so Michael is trying to find Walt and goes to Locke and is like, where's my son? I know you know where my son is. And Locke's like, I truly don't know where your son is. I haven't interacted with him since you told me to stop interacting with him. And so both of them decide to work together to try and find where Walt is. And we learn that Walt is getting attacked by a fucking polar bear.
And is in the same trees that Boone and fake Shannon were hiding in from the island monster thingy. And Jack or Kate, whoever in the first episode were
I think they're called banyan
from.
trees.
Okay. But I don't know if it's the same one or if it just happens to be the same kind of tree.
I think it's just the same kind. I think there's just a bunch of banyan trees. I think that's what they're called.
Gotcha.
Like all over this island.
And so we see this polar bear that we can tell in early, to mid 2000s is very CGI'd, attacking the banyan trees. And eventually Michael and Locke kind of go above onto a branch, make their way over on top of the like little opening of like this grouping of trees, drop down a knife to Walt so that he can defend himself from the bear. And then they hoist him up and Walt does stab the bear.
Oh, badass moment for Walt.
Amazing. And the bear stops for a second and then they hoist him up with some like vines and such and he gets saved. And now Michael is down in that banyan tree grove thingy. The bear comes back and Michael stabs it and the knife stays in the bear and goes away. So now they don't have the knife, but it just the bear like runs off. Which like, by the way, if you get stabbed twice, I don't even care if you're a bear. How are you not dead? But anyway,
it was also a big ass bear.
That was a big, and it was a polar bear again. We should say that it's a polar bear.
It's a polar bear. Yeah.
And so then Michael makes his way up and Walt collapses in his arms. They're hugging and Michael has a moment if instead of yelling at him, is just like, I'm just glad you're okay and all that kind of stuff. And Walt's like, so sorry, like Vincent ran off and like all this stuff. So now we don't know where Vincent is. And Locke says he made himself back to you before, he'll come back again kind of thing. So they go back and that's when Michael is able to show the drawings that night that he's always drawn in the letters and such. And that shows Walt that his father has always loved him and has always cared about him. And that maybe there was something a little more going on with why he wasn't. That's when Michael says it's complicated as to why he wasn't involved with his life. Walt has a reason to believe and trust in Michael now. So, overall.
Oh, there's one big thing. Big thing.
What?
At the very, very end, when Locke and Boone are trying to find Vincent, they're using the whistle. And out from the jungle shows
oh my God, yeah. Claire.
Yeah.
She didn't look pregnant anymore.
She didn't. She did not look pregnant anymore. And she looked very frazzled. So
very frazzled, very disheveled. And they find her come through the woods and such. So I think the others have her baby.
Ooh, we'll have to see.
Or the baby died.
Potentially.
And is a part of the others.
I will let you know that the next episode is called Homecoming. What do you think, or who do you think this episode's about? And I will say, it is like the Claire storyline. You get the payoff of like,
okay,
yeah.
I was gonna say,
and, like, doesn't cover it.
I think the next one's a Locke-centered episode.
Okay. It is a Charlie. This is the second Charlie-centric episode.
I was going to say, I don't think that they would give a Claire-centric episode with her coming back like this, because I think it's going to be obvious that they're going to talk about Claire. It would be somebody who is connected to that storyline. So if it wasn't Locke, I'm not shocked by Charlie. So that makes sense.
And I'll also say that next week's episode, for some reason, Damon Lindelof says this is his least favorite episode of the entire series. I think he's crazy. I think it's not that bad of an episode, but we'll have to see. It's been a while. I barely remember it, so we'll have to see.
Wow. Well, it's going to be fitting that we have Claire coming back and then a Nanny episode called Schlepped Away. So
that's true.
It's going to be interesting. But yeah, so my LVP of the episode is obviously Susan. My MVP is Michael. I mean, obviously, I think that, he's clearly a good father with a good heart and is trying his best. So, but overall, very good, very solid episode.
Yeah, I thought it was a ton of fun. Let's very quickly get into some comments. So we've got Jackie, who says, back in the 90s, lots of LGBT actors were not out, so lots of roles went to straight people.
It's true.
Oh, wait, I just lost that. I lost the comment. Went to gay people. Sean Hayes refused to answer questions about being gay for the longest time during Will and Grace.
He actually never answered that question until after the show was over, and then became publicly out as a gay man.
That's so fascinating. And then Caitlin says, I love Victor, but I get your point. Accurate representation. A transgender person playing a transgender person matters.
Victor.
I love Victor is the name of the show.
Oh, I thought she said, I love Victor.
Oh.
And I was like, who's Victor?
Work. I love Victor too.
Great.
And
but
then
the show, love Victor. Yes.
Carrie Ann says, okay, I so get dad drama. They tend to not understand what is a normal thing and what is a big thing. At least mine did. And I think, yeah.
And talking about like fathers like being like, call me now, period. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. You're like, what do I do? What do I do?
I like legitimately at work one day, my vice president is the same age as my father. And I literally broke it down at a work retreat of being like, this is what a lot of like baby boomers will write. This is how millennials internalize it. And they're like, and he was like, I had no idea a period is like yelling at people. And I was like, yes. And a text message saying something like, dinner is ready, period. You feel like, what a passive aggressive way to tell me dinner's ready. Are you mad at me? Like, you know.
For sure. I think that is actually pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
But this was our 14th episode of Hot Mess Moments. Make sure if you haven't already, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Helps us out tremendously. 5 stars. Leave us a written review. I saw Tyler did. Tyler left us a written review.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks you. And make sure to follow us at Hot Mess Moments on Twitter, or follow us on our individual Twitters. Mine is at 8-Bit Dylan. If you want to talk about anything lost, send it my way.
And if you want to talk about anything the nanny, send it my way at AugustaWind11.
This has been Hot Mess Moments, and we'll see you next week with another episode. And until then, stay awesome, stay beautiful, you lovely people.
Bye.
Bye-bye.